Hey everybody, today we are here with Yancey Strickler, one of the founders of Kickstarter and most recently Metalabel, and the author of a few books, including, what is it called? This Could Be Our Future, and also editor of the Dark Forest Anthology of the Internet. Yeah, I was interested to talk to Yancey. I started reading his book and his thinking around financial maximization and how he's sort of trying to create like mechanisms to address that for creative people. So welcome, Yancey. How are you doing on this hot day?
You took the words out of my mouth. Yes, it is hot today. But yeah, great to be with you. Thank you very much.
Maybe tell us a little bit about your background. I know from the book that you had a New York kind of counterculture beginning.
Well, I mean, I grew up, my, OG beginning is growing up on a farm in Southwest Virginia. So I grew up in the country in a very Christian home and, lived a very rural life, but always through books and through culture dreamed of the wider world, and moved to New York 25 years ago to be a music journalist, which I made a living doing for my first decade here. And then met a friend who'd had an idea that became Kickstarter. And three of us were co-founders in creating Kickstarter. And then I've had a string of projects since. But yeah, it starts with a reluctant farm kid finds his way to New York and begins to find himself. Still on that same path, I think.
Yeah. Well, me too, I guess. But so, I mean, music journalism, music criticism, that was like the Village Voice era.
Yeah, wrote for The Voice a lot, Spin Magazine. Pitchfork was one of the early writers for Pitchfork. And yeah, that was my whole life, my whole scene I was a part of for a long time.
Was there a particular
Now there are, what's that?
particular like genre of music or like indie rock or something that was you were like mostly drawn towards?
Yeah, indie rock was my main focus. Also had a very deep knowledge of a lot of field recordings and ethno musicographic sort of records. Smithsonian Folkways is something I've written a lot about.
Harry Smith?
But yeah, just a love. Yeah, Harry Smith is a top 3 hero. Harry Smith is incredible.
And yeah, I guess in a way you were lucky in that you made this transition from music writing and so on, which does it still exist as a career path these days? I'm not quite sure. I don't think we have a Lester Bangs in our midst right now.
There are great writers, great critics. There aren't a lot of places where those people can get paid. Some of them make podcasts these days, some make videos. But yeah, it was never an easy industry to make a living, should it really? But it's definitely become harder. And it's as someone who cares so deeply about music, it's also just been fascinating to watch both music and film, which were the dominant forms of culture for me growing up, along with, television, maybe is the other dominant one, but music and film have definitely receded in their cultural authority, their place in the world. And, I think those industries are going to look very different 2 decades from now than anything or even shorter than that, anything that we've been used to.
Completely. I mean, yeah, well, we can get into that, but it's fascinating to see how culture keeps morphing and changing right now. But anyway, so you somehow were able to sort of jump to a new lily pad. You made the jump to a tech project.
It was interesting because that was in 2005. I met Perry Chen, who'd had this idea for what people came to call crowdfunding. And we started talking about it together. And he was an artist and I was a music writer. I ran a tiny record label then too. And we started conspiring on it together. But there was a strange feeling for us as creative people to be working on a business type project. And it felt like a line that we were crossing. It even felt like a betrayal of a certain like oath we had taken. And yeah, it just felt out of step with what our peers were doing and what was okay. I mean, to me in high school, like you had to choose, it's still this way, I think. You had to choose whether you like sports or music. And similarly, you have to choose, are you an artist or do you like touch the world of business?
Yeah.
And I felt like we were one of the early projects that bridged that line. And we were, as we got more confident, we became proud of that and really advocated for more creative people should start projects like this, because there's a great opportunity to share a point of view, to manifest something bigger than you. And also, like there's a certain mindset that most businesses have that the book talks about of seeing the right outcome in any decision as being whichever one makes the most money. That is how most businesses today are run. An artist is someone who is equipped, especially equipped, to be open to a different set of decisions, to follow a different path of values. And that's what we wanted to be and aspired to be. And I think we did a pretty good job of that. And I think that opportunity and that longer trajectory of how can different types of people have access to power, have access to influence, can shape the world. I think that is still something that, I don't know, I explicitly think about a lot, but I think underlies a lot of the work that has consumed my life.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. Yeah, I sometimes I think that in a way, like the same focus and attention that in the 60s went to like artists like Warhol or like, the Rolling Stones or the Beatles, or whatever, that now sort of goes to the entrepreneurs, like they've almost, it's almost like, yeah, I don't know. Once again, whether it's a good or a bad phenomenon, we could also think about, but it does feel like that type of creativity, like business creativity, is like become like highly valued over the last decades, and sort of it's no longer sort of an equivalent. I mean, of course, some musicians like Taylor Swift, for instance, are also genius at managing their business enterprises, but it doesn't always go together.
Yeah, I would say in both of those instances, I think, and this is shame on me for bringing this lens because I don't bring this lens of things, but I think there's a way of viewing all of those people as essentially culturally entrepreneurial, and that they were people or groups who just started entirely new scenes, new movements. But like you can even take a business competitive analysis to like the British invasion and to say what the Beatles were and the Stones are the challenger brand and like the Kinks are the upstart brand that never gets over a certain line. And there's just even a way to see the way that I think a lot of those projects reshaped the world, shaped culture. And, and I think now that the web has flattened all human experience into simultaneously culture, commerce, advertising, self-expression. You can find a project like the one I'm working on in Metalabel, or a lot of other very interesting modern, sort of meta-modern projects that integrate a lot of different systems and ideas into making something new. But that feels both familiar, but also speaks to just the ways our experiences have evolved online. And so, yeah, I think we're still in the early stages of that process. This piece I wrote about the post-individual really argues that what we're doing on the web now is really what's going to shape, I think, the coming centuries of the human experience.
Let's back up for a second. Can you explain what the thesis was? Because I think that was what I actually thought to reach out to you.
Yeah. So I've been thinking a lot for years about my experience as an online person. And I've been like a message board person since the late 90s. And just a lot of my experience has been online. And
which message board? Me too. I was on Echo and Word and stuff like that.
One called I Love Music. It's like very small scenes. It's still like.
And I don't want to break you. I was just curious. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. And in reflecting on my experience online, I wrote a piece a few years ago called the Dark Forest theory of the internet, which said that there's an idea in Fermi's paradox that says we look up into the universe and we send out messages saying, hello, it's Earth. Where is everyone? And we wait for someone to call us back. And because no one does, we assume that the universe is empty and it's silent. We're the only ones here. No one writes us back. And instead, the idea is think about a dark forest at night. Similarly, things are quiet. It feels like nothing moves. But in reality, the dark forest is full of animals. But those animals have learned that there are predators there and that to reveal yourself is dangerous because it just makes you vulnerable. And so this idea applied to Earth and the universe says, well, maybe we're the only ones foolish enough to reveal where we are. And eventually we'll learn why the universe is silent. And I applied this same idea to how I use the internet. And to say that for myself, and I felt like for a lot of my friends, this was written in 2019, that we were not willing to be ourselves on any of the main channels because it seemed too dangerous. You could be trolled, you could be canceled, your words could be taken out of context. There's all these negative incentives, and everything we see on social media is advertising, essentially, attempts to manipulate public opinion to certain perspectives. And the only logical thing to do is to opt out of those spaces and instead to go to dark forests, small chat groups, smaller spaces where there's less risk. And yes, there's not the upside of going viral, but there is the upside of safety and security. And we had learned that we'd reached the stage of the internet where that's what we learned that we needed as people. And this piece, The Post Individual, was really started 5 years ago. And it was thinking about, well, in that world where we're a member of these communities, what does that do? What has that done to me? And I'm a member of many different communities. And ultimately, each one of those represents a different part of me, a different slice of myself. I'm in like an artist group. I'm in an entrepreneur group. I'm in a group of people I went to college with. I'm in a group of people I went to high school with. They're like different slices of myself. And that what the internet is doing is the internet has become a universe where we are all continually being born again as new individuals, as these sub-parts of ourselves. And all of our sub-parts of ourselves are meeting these slices of self for everyone else. And online, we're making an entirely new society that sits over top of and around the one that we're physically in. And that I call this change, this metamorphosis, the state of being the post-individual, where we graduate from just seeing our identity as just me, who I am, and instead see our identities as extremely fractal, as being very complicated, as being something that we might decide at any given moment who we are choosing to be. And the piece touches on the history of individualism. The piece touches on, which goes back to the start to Christianity. It touches on early research of how people use computers and tries to look forward and say, what does that mean for where we're going? And so, yeah, to me, it's trying to understand how the experiences that we are having as some of the first generations to be really online. To say that I think our experiences are more and more the future, and even our notion of politics will change as a result of this. Traditionally, politics is based around one person, one vote. Already online, we've switched to more of a one identity, one vote kind of concept. The idea of a human has been broken into smaller pieces. And so it's trying to think about where that goes, both emotionally for us and structurally for the wider world. And yeah, that's on my website, The Post Individual is the name of that piece.
Where do you think it's
very, very long.
Where do you think it goes?
Where do I think it goes? I think that what the corporation was to the 20th century is what small groups of aligned people are to the 21st century. That, historically we've gone from like empires to nation states to corporations. And I think that with the sort of tools that we have online and the way the web lets us just in a very polyamorous way, just be a part of different networks that are making things or agitating for certain things together. I believe that's going to be the core social structure that the world is going to be shaped. And that will happen in business, it will happen in culture, it will happen in politics, it will happen lots of different ways. And that is where power is going to move. And so, I see that as being a new type of tribalism. It's going to have a lot of upsides and a lot of downsides. It will ultimately be empowering a very liberal, classically liberal concept of like ideas, because people will be able to be in groups and advocate for all kinds of things, including many things that you might very much disagree with. But ultimately, this will be revealing all of these preferences and desires that exist between us that the web has made tangible rather than just imaginary.
I mean, some of that also kind of, I guess with mass media, the age of the TV and all that stuff, and it was like, it felt like there was sort of cultural centrality, right? Like certain stars or certain, writers had all the attention. I mean, are we reaching the end of that? So it'll be like many, many more just like small scale kind of people who appeal to a certain niche or whatever.
Yeah, if we even think about if you're a Twitter user, the experience of Twitter pre-Elon and post-Elon. Pre-Elon, Twitter feels like more the big three networks where it's, hey, you have blue checks, it's very organized, everyone is here, Dan Rather's here, Jerry Rice is here, whatever, everyone is here. This is like the world's phone book. And then post-Elon, all of that has been destroyed in an attempt to destroy that power structure, which is really what that, and it has been very successful in doing so. And we're in like a post-Babel moment where we don't know where the central conversation is anymore. And for a lot of people, that's threatening because they don't know where to market, or they don't know where to influence, or maybe with that central conversation, they felt like they could control things a bit more. And now it's diffuse. Now we don't know where the center is. And that tends to be frightening for a lot of people because you don't know what's going to emerge. It could be everything from Occupy Wall Street to QAnon to tea parties to just, Dime Square, to just a cultural scene. And that's the kind of wide openness that I think we're in now. And I believe we're just at the very start of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I guess in a way, I saw that the Twitter shift. I mean, he's very much made himself the sort of central character in the drama. Like, I think I unfollowed him. Yet every other time I open up X, he's my top person or whatever. So he's kind of created his own like fiefdom, I guess. I mean, have you looked at Janusz Varoufakis? Is that his name? The techno-feudalism theory?
Yeah, I'm familiar with. I bought the book. I haven't read it yet, but yes, I'm generally familiar with it.
He basically feels that we're no longer in. I mean, he's being provocative. Capitalism. We're now in techno-feudalism, and we're all kind of like, people are like, kind of digital serfs. Because you can't even move around the internet unless you have an identity from Google or Facebook or something like that.
The funny truth of the web, though, is that even for the concentration of certain powers and market players, I do still ultimately think it is users. It is people that have the most agency. Like the ability to, for a lot of things, the ability to leave is pretty high. And I think a lot of tech companies are terrified of their customer base leaving, and they're, one of the ways we tried to architect my current project, Metalabel, is to have a post-platform architecture where people can easily leave and be a part of other services, and you're not using a lock-in of data to try to keep people in a certain place. That's been a tactic that a lot of web companies have used. But yeah, I mean, I think that at its best, the web allows us to move freely and to make our own choices. But of course, not always easy. And of course, people are often conspiring against us to make that difficult.
Sure. I mean, like,
long term, yeah.
But I would love to leave Spotify, but I mean, they seem to have wrapped up so much music. It just seems like you would be really somewhat deprived, if you were away from them. Okay, let's go through your history a little bit. So, like, you're a music journalist. You met somebody. How did you guys meet? The Kickstarter team.
Yeah, Perry was worked at a restaurant in Williamsburg where I was a regular. We became friends. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. And he
And
had this great idea.
and what was your skill set from what that was helpful for getting the thing to blow up?
I worked at a company that used technology as my day job, so I understood the internet well for 2005, and I knew a lot of artists, and was well connected to the creative world.
Nice. And then so you built like a MVP and you got the funding and then you built it up and stuff like that.
Longer, messier story, but yes, it was 4 years. 4 years later, it launched. 2009, Kickstarter launched.
And I guess I hear about it less now. I assume it's still going, plowing along. But for some reason, my community or extended community kind of used it more, and now I guess that just happens. It's like it's probably moved on to other communities and so on.
There's definitely it's still going. Just celebrated its 15th birthday.
Is there anything that you wish had been done differently with that? Or are you really happy enough with how it went along?
Big picture, happy, proud. Micro, they're different steps, different moves that a more mature person who's learned the things I've learned would maybe do differently.
Yeah, I guess one thing that,
but there's
one thing.
Well, just there's a strong tension when you're creating a space that's opinionated, and that is, we took a position of approving projects that went live on Kickstarter and just trying to create a space that was we wanted to be a part of. And then as you become a very popular service where people see they can become seemingly millionaires overnight, you have a lot of people working hard to get into such a system. And it's a challenging thing to manage over time. I think that's something I'd love to, I don't know, think more about, explore again.
And are you still actively involved with that project, or are you kind of like more in the back seat?
At a high level, I like advise some people, but no day-to-day involvement at all.
Yeah. And so then what was the inspiration for the Metalabel project? Maybe explain to people what it's about. I thought it was super interesting.
Yeah, I left Kickstarter, stepped down as CEO in 2017, and then spent a couple of years thinking back about that experience. And in particular, Kickstarter became a public benefit corporation. And so wanted to understand the traditional expectations that existed around companies to just profit maximize, and what it meant for us to take this step. And so that book,
explain how it means for people, a public benefit corporation, how it's different.
Yeah, well, since the early 1970s, the conventional wisdom is that the job of a corporation is to maximize shareholder value, which means to make every decision from a litmus test of what will make us the most money. And a public benefit corporation is a different for-profit corporate structure. It's been around since 2012, where you as a company can write a charter about what explicitly you wish to be held accountable to. So it's a chance for you to say, it's actually not shareholder value that's most important to us, it's X, Y, or Z things. So Kickstarter reincorporated as this, and we wrote a charter with 12 commitments and provisions that the company should be held accountable to, rather than the pursuit of profit. And so that's been in place since 2015. And was proud of doing that. We were one of the first big companies to do that.
Does that make it impossible to be like a publicly traded company?
No, not at all. Not at all. It just is saying you basically have a double bottom line. So certainly people might not be as interested in that, but it's more almost a strategic value statement that has some teeth because it's part of your legal charter. So I wrote a book kind of about that experience, as well as a different lens for thinking about value, called Bentoism, which is a whole other side path. And
can you explain it?
Years after that, so Bentoism, so the book talks about why is it that we have defaulted to thinking money is the only rational form of value. We understand other values exist, community, loyalty, how we feel, but yet we lack the way to make decisions from that perspective in any sort of group setting, especially in a business setting. So like, how can we think about that differently? And the kind of the crucifix of business today, the ultimate symbol is of a hockey stick growth chart, which is just the x-axis of time, y-axis of money, units sold, whatever your self-interest is, and just the line sloping up and to the right. And this is what you want to see. And one day I was sketching and tried extending the x-axis of time far out beyond like whatever that first quarter is you're showing in that hockey stick graph, and imagining instead it extends far out. And similarly, the y-axis measuring some sort of self-interest you want to grow. I also made that a lot longer because I thought, well, as your self-interest grows, like that can grow infinitely, your responsibilities can grow infinitely. And I put a 2x2 over this larger expanse of space where this hockey stick chart was suddenly this phallic little arrow in the corner rather than some dominant thing, and saw that there were these four dimensions, these four separate dimensions that were distinct. There was now me, the bottom left quadrant, what I as an individual want and need right now. This is where financial demands come in. In the bottom right, there was also future me, this person I hope to one day become. And I saw how, well, actually the decisions I make now and now me affect what future me's are even possible. In the top left, I saw there was now us. As self-interest grows, so do responsibility. So it can't just be me, it's us. So there is this consideration of what are the people around me who depend on me? What do they want and need? What do I owe them? And finally, in the top right is future us, our kids and everybody else's kids too. And every decision we make, of course, affects their lived experience also. And I suddenly saw that all four of these spaces are active in any decision I make. I just never see them. I have a hard time seeing anything beyond now me.
Yeah.
And I just wrote next to this simple sketch, like, what is this a picture of? And I wrote beyond near term orientation. This was a simple 2x2 to help you see beyond the near term. And looking at again, I realized that was an acronym that said bento. And I thought, oh, this is a bento box, the Japanese packed lunch, which honors the Japanese philosophy of hara hachibu, which says the goal of a meal is to be 80% full. That way you're still hungry for tomorrow. So the bento was this same idea for self-interest, making decisions, seeing things according to your values. And
Funny,
that project took on
it's a little bit like, Ken Wilber's 4-quadrant model.
I do.
Is it basically the same? Does it map onto that very well or not so much?
Yeah, I mean, his verbiage is not easy. Yeah, this is like orange, but this is teal.
Yeah. That's the spiral dynamics, but the 4 quadrants is the thing where it's like, they, we, it's, and it's like, subjective,
yes.
objective, and interobjective.
Yes. I mean, I do think that like the Freud's dimensions of self map to this actually pretty well. And there is, I've recently had a professor who teaches at Cornell and at Penn, teaches decision making, told me that he is teaching the bento in his class, and
right.
It's going to be a part of a textbook, and it's actually something that is being used inside. He helps governments negotiate and make large decisions, and that the bento was used
so cool.
for the New York State hospital system to commit to its to certain carbon certain carbon pledges, and they used the bento to get there. But it was a project that, just emerged and became a focus and became a community. And after a couple of years of doing that, I got really burnt out, and I became exhausted from holding a lot of space and from constantly being this teacher.
Doing that being what exactly? You were holding like courses?
For the Bento Society became a group of a few thousand people. And I was creating space, creating events, doing a lot, being a community manager, and hit a wall. because I felt very alone and very burnt out. And I did the whole going on hiatus for a minute email, the whole cycle. And then just gave myself a month to just reset. And I ended up reading two things at the same time that opened my eyes in a different way. One was a book I've read many times called Our Band Could Be Your Life. It's the story of punk and hardcore in America. Great book by Michael Azarad, fantastic book. And it features 12 narratives of different artists, and basically every narrative is the same. There's a band somewhere in America who makes really noisy music in the early 80s. They develop a tiny following. They decide to record themselves. They try to find some label to put them out. No one will. So they have to make their own label, which just means a PO box, a logo, and a name, and they put themselves out. And every time they did that, their friends and other people would just show up and say, hey, we make music like you, or we want to make music like you. Will you put us out? And over, by the time one of these labels' first release came out, they already had like 4 other ones on the way. Because being a label is an act not just of releasing music or a form of art, it is also an act of manifesting it. Every hip hop record that Def Jam put out back in the day made more hip hop happen because people would listen to that. They would want to make their own thing. Some of them would go on to make music with Def Jam. And so it's this cycle of manifesting culture, not just putting it out, not just making money from it, but it's like manifesting at its best. At the same time, I was also reading about the history of the Royal Society, which is a group that started in 1660 in London. And it was a group of professors who met at a pub every week. And they decided to start a club based on the idea of proving facts through evidence rather than the decree of the church or the king. So to do this, they began conducting some of the first experiments, and they began to publish them. And what I see as the first zine is called Philosophical Transactions. First issue came out in 1664. And in these pages, each month, each quarter, these people would conduct the first experiments in history. And through them iteratively doing this and learning from each other and other people reading them and wanting to follow in their footsteps, this is where Isaac Newton published his Principia Mathematica. This is where the Babbage machine was funded. This is where the first microscope was made. This is where Benjamin Franklin published his kite experiment. This is where peer review and the scientific method were invented. And this happened through an iterative process of a group of people just trying to publish work expressing the same idea, facts through evidence.
I mean, they were at a bit of a high level in society, though, right? I mean, they weren't like a bunch of, sort of zinesters living in, high rises in Detroit or something like that. I mean, they were like.
I can't speak to the social politics of 1660, but these were professors, which means, yes, they are men of certain standing, and Sir Christopher Wren is the main person of this.
Yeah.
But they made the Enlightenment and the scientific revolution to a large degree happen simply by collectively publishing under the same umbrella. And looking at these, reading these simultaneously, I just saw both of these projects are doing the same thing. It is a group of people who share the same worldview, putting out work, sometimes collaboratively, but also just on their own under a shared context that manifested some point of view. And so I thought this structure, it's like a label, but it exists not just in music, but it exists in science. It exists in art. It can exist in publishing. It can exist actually in any creative form. Yeah. And I call this idea a meta label. Where a group of people can release work together.
But I guess often you have like little magazines, which are like this sort of crux point for some new movement or vision to sort of, whether it's like the Dadaists or the Surrealists, or then they can often like excommunicate each other. You don't get to publish in the magazine anymore, and so on. So for whatever reason, I mean, it doesn't really seem to be what we can talk about what's happening now in relationship to all this stuff. But okay, cool. So that makes sense. So explain again, the meta label was to make it easier for people to form these types of sort of aggregates.
Yeah, it was initially just an exploration with me and 5 other people, 5 peers, trying to communicate this idea and provide a path for people to experiment with the same form. And where it has evolved now, 2 years later, is 100 days ago, we turned on a platform, metalabel.com, that lets a creative person or group of creative people start a label, publish work together or on their own under a shared umbrella identity. They can publish any type of work, music, a video, an essay. It could be digital, physical, for sale or for free. And if there is, with anything they release, they can set a financial split from any drop they make, where me, you, and a friend, maybe we're doing something and we said we'd split it equally. For every sale that happens, a third of the money goes to each of our bank accounts, and there's no need for any sort of back-end admin. It's something that exists structurally in Metalabel, which is a new innovation that we're introducing. And so it's trying to create, trying to create a very easy operating system for people to make work together.
But you don't need to use something like Stripe. It's like a payment system. How do you do the splitting up?
It does use Stripe as basic onboarding. And within every release, we've designed a release agreement, which is just a specific split for that drop, where you as the group of people behind it will just set the percentages. And our system, for every dollar that comes through, will just move that dollar into everyone's accounts at that proportion. Mm-hmm. And we just designed a novel way to do that.
That's so cool. Does it work for crypto also, or is that in the future?
We actually started in crypto and then left that space. So something like splits is a common function in crypto that we helped innovate on with some interesting things that we then figured out how to make happen with just bank accounts and credit cards. So I think there are a lot of interesting things about crypto. I don't think it's a space that creative people want to play in. And I don't think that the crypto audience is interested in creative work the way I think of it. Yeah. So, I could imagine, I don't think crypto is going away, but yeah, it's not where we are now or in the near future.
Yeah, I've lost my taste for it. I never really had a big taste for it, but I mean, I'm still intrigued. Like, Mirror, XYZ, like that was sort of interesting. It's great, like a blockchain-based publishing platform where everything can be turned into an NFT or something. Okay, so you've only been going for 100 days, but it's been happening for a couple of years now. What are you seeing? I guess one question I also had was, beyond individuals, could different like organizations or companies also come together to create like a new kind of aggregate or something like that?
Possibly.
It's
I mean, we're 100 days in. There's been $100,000 spent on releases. It's been about 40 drops to date. We are handpicking what's here right now because we're trying to make the back end ready to really scale. We're a couple months away from that happening. So we're inviting in a couple projects a week. And the most common forms we're seeing there's a lot of publications and zines, a lot of physical and digital work together in a bundle. I published a new book, The Dark Forest Anthology of the Internet, with 10 other writers. We've sold 1,000+ copies of that. And then a format that I'm personally excited by, that I had a lot of success with the Post Individual, is releasing work as a limited edition zip file. The Post Individual was a piece I'd worked on for 5 years. And because of that, it built up so much research and like so much expectation in my head around what this needed to be. And ultimately came up with the idea of releasing it as a zip that would have a PDF of the essay, a video of me talking about it, a dump of my Scrivener drafts of like 50 pages of notes and research, and to just make 250 of them for $5 each, and just to treat that as the first edition. And ends up all 250 of those sold out in about 10 days. So $1,000 got paid to me for this piece. A week later, I published it for anyone to see on my own blog. But what's interesting is that normally when I publish work, I feel a lot of anxiety, where even if the response is great, it's like, oh, it could have been better, and someone else is getting more readers than me or whatever. There's just like weird emotional places of comparison I go into. And instead with this one, where I capped the number of people that I determined was like most meaningful to me at 250, it gave me this feeling of like immense success and satisfaction before the wider public had even read it. And now the piece is like going beyond even my wildest imaginations with how widely it's being referenced and talked about. And I feel like some of the ideas are beginning to be integrated into our collective consciousness. And rather than getting all hyped about it or needing it, instead I can be a bit more, I can just enjoy it, because there's like an initial satisfaction of like my work was respected and acknowledged in a way that felt truthful to me. And that's just let me let go of all the anxiety that's normally part and parcel of publishing for me personally. So that's been an interesting experiment.
Very cool. So what are some of your favorite, besides your own experiences with it, some of your favorite like uses of it so far?
Well, I mean, there's a zine that went up this week from a bunch of writers from all over the world, 25 writers who are all part of this split together. So every time someone buys one of their zines, it's like people all around the world, genuinely all around the world, are going to get paid. There's a label from Japan called FKMMM that puts out poetry and photography books that are printed and published in Japan that are beautiful. They're a Metalabel exclusive project. And then one that went live today that I'm very excited about is from the Creative Independent, which is a great resource for artists and creative people that I also co-founded.
Okay, so
They've
what is the Creative Independent? I saw I didn't get it.
Yeah.
What is that? What is that?
Yes, the Creative Independent is a resource of emotional and practical advice for creative people. Every day it has a new interview or essay with an artist about what they do. Everyone from Philip Glass to Matthew Barney to Stevie Nicks to Danny Brown, all kinds of people have spoken with it. It's an amazing project. And this is a zine that includes Philip Glass and some other great people on how to make a living as an artist. And that's a limited edition $5 zine that the Creative Independent published with Metalabel today. And by later this fall, we'll begin to invite more people in to release work with us on the space. And yeah, and the group I'm a part of, the Dark Forest Collective, will be publishing 2 more books in the next year not by any of us, by new authors who emerged when we said, hey, we're putting out work exploring the dark forest, like this space. Does anyone have anything they want to work on? And a couple of our heroes, like straight up heroes, reached out saying, I have something I'd love to do with you.
Who's a hero?
I will save the announcement for later this summer. Yeah.
No, those are all really great. I guess one thing that was intriguing to me is like, so I'm on Substack. And it's been fantastic for me. Like, I keep getting new people, checking it out and so on. But I also begin to feel like I'm a sort of like a hamster on a wheel, because I'm for a while I was super inspired, with all these ideas that I wanted to get out. Now I'm feeling I've slowed down a little bit, and the number of people who are getting on Substack still, like the volume of material. And then it's like, I sort of feel like, I guess somebody talked about how like the way people make money on the internet is either like unbundling or rebundling. And it feels like Substack has been this like incredible unbundling where, normally you would pay like, $10 a month to a magazine and you get like hundreds of writers. Now you have hundreds of writers, but you have to, like, if you want to read their whole thing, you have to pay individually. It doesn't really feel like a sustainable model to me. So I'm beginning to think about, because I've had a lot of magazines in the past. In my 20s, I had a literary magazine, Open City. In my 40s, we had a sort of early magazine around the whole psychedelic culture called Reality Sandwich. That was also, you were reminding me a lot when you were talking before, because it did like build a whole community of interests around it. And unfortunately, we had a falling out, me and the other people who started it, and they gave it away to another company, which I really don't like. So it still exists, but in a very depressing form for me anyway. But yeah, so I was thinking, like, how could you re-aggregate people into something right now? Because yeah, I mean, how would you make it a gain for people rather than like a sacrifice? Because if you're making, X amount on $5 a month subscriptions, you're not going to do that if you have like 100 writers and you have, I don't know if you have any thoughts about that or approach to that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think the subscriber model is important. I also use Substack, love Substack. I've been a part of it from the beginning, know the founders well. I think that the model I would advocate for is, yes, have have your Substack, have your regular channel, but I think there is an opportunity for all of us as creative people to have periodic larger works or works that we might want to express more deeply, or to be like not just a post, or even to be something that we want to sell. And I think oftentimes those projects would be ones that also might be well served by being a collaboration with someone else. And there just isn't a space to do that. There isn't a space, there isn't a marketplace where we as creative people can go and list things and be among a community of peers and feel like we might have some discovery from other people who like other things here, and that we have an opportunity to invite our audiences to engage with us in a way that's a little bit different. And so like I have seen the writer Craig Maude is a friend and someone whose work I've always loved, and he's run a membership model that he does himself for many years, as well as having a great newsletter, and he publishes books. And he has shown over and over that his subscribers tend to stay around the same, and then he'll publish a book. And books, he'll give like a discount for subscribers, and new people can also become a subscriber, and they'll get a discount on the book if they pay a certain amount. And every time he launches a new book, a new piece of people that's tangible, he sees his subscriber number hit like a new bump up, because he has expanded himself beyond his network, and there's something tangible other than just the stream for people to tap into. And I believe that model of like, I don't think people should be giving up their individual practices. Like I believe very much in the power and importance of the individual, but I also just believe that we gain a lot by being in a shared context. So for the Dark Forest Collective, anything we put out, we have a deal where we say 30% of the money goes back to the Dark Forest Collective so we can fund more projects, and 70% goes to you as the artist. And we'll like help promote you, and we'll be a part of helping you put your work out into the world. And it's a way that we can put out more work that stands for what we believe in, that we can get paid back for the work that we do, that we can constantly be platforming new voices and like expanding our circle. And none of us have to give up anything about our normal path. And in fact, all of our own channels become opportunities to promote what we're doing in this one group. But it's ended up feeling very natural and like it just feels good to do. It feels nice to make something with a couple other people and have it not be so serious. Like the challenge of, you're saying, like with the magazine in the past, it had to be so buttoned up. You have to make it legally structured. There's like this has to be for a long time, or it's not really worth doing. I think what you see in this type of model is that something like a more casual collaboration of like, hey, let's do something, or hey, I'll throw myself into this. I think that becomes more possible. And then if we were on a split for that, and something happens to do pretty well, and we get a few $1,000s from something that we played some small part in, that's amazing. And that's the kind of results that we're seeing now. Like for contributors to the Dark Forest book, everyone there is already getting at least $2,000 from publishing something they've already published before, but in a book that we did together. And so I just think that there is a rhythm between the normal publishing cadence that a lot of us create as podcasters, writers, whatever it is that we do. And there's also space for a periodic, bigger moment that more reflects, here's why we do, here's the real reason why we do what we do. Here's like, I'm going to collect some of the best things we've done and try to make it a celebration. Moments like that, I think, are helpful. And so to me, this just creates a normalized pathway where you can do that, where the tools are straightforward, where you don't have to be on your own. And it's in that magic of, a lot of the labels and groups I look at, the initial handshake agreement people tend to make is, if one of us did it, we all did it. And it's like, okay, within this category of work, hey, we're all going to hype each other. And that's how this is going to be something that's like cool and we're all going to benefit from. And so I think it's that type of model, and we're seeing early examples of that. And my expectation is that within a couple of years, I don't think this is overnight, because this is a behavior change, which takes time. But my expectation is that in a couple of years, this is a very normal and profitable way to create. I envision a world where a creator logs onto Metalabel, and on their earnings page, they're seeing like amounts they're getting from the split from 20 different things they're a part of.
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly like this passive income can roll in, and it's just chill. It's just chill. Sometimes you're the star, sometimes you're part of a constellation. It's great.
Interesting. Yeah, it might be the next generation below me that has to figure that out a little bit, because I still feel that like the Gen Zers that I know are all kind of like, still have very much like a sort of Mandarin approach when it comes to the writing and so on. No, very cool. I love all these projects. It's very interesting. I'm curious also, yeah, well, I mean, to switch from culture to like society, like, how freaked out are you right now? What's freaking you out? And how are you, trying to respond to that in a way?
Well, I mean, I'm heads down in my micro world of having a young family and having a startup that's in a project that's in a do or die moment. So
That project being the Metalabel one, or the
yeah, Metalabel. And so my view is limited and deep. But I remain an optimist. I am I remain an optimist. I am involved with many projects that are very not optimistic.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but just a lot of climate related projects. Extinction Rebellion is something that I've helped for a long time.
What's talking about them right now?
I mean, I think XR has made a huge global impact and created a new norm of civil disobedience around the climate that has sparked some superficial policy changes. And inevitably, as was always happened, it just led to a generation of more extreme groups that will, I think, continue. But there's an offshoot of XR that's on Metalabel called Hard Art. That's the founders of Extinction Rebellion and Brian Eno and Ez Devlin and Danny Boyle and a bunch of amazing artists making work together that's trying to, create a less antagonistic, but still like vibe shifting energy around democracy and climate. So yeah, I believe there's lots of work to be done, and
Wealth,
we're not going anywhere. We got to figure it out.
what about, I mean, obviously you talk about financial maximization, but also like the extremes of like wealth inequality. And also, I guess how like, I mean, the tech world seems to have become the exemplar of this kind of like insanity of like, people. I mean, I was just looking at a figure yesterday that my friend Josh Fox posted about like, Musk's, pre-pandemic value compared to now, Zuckerberg compared to now, Bezos compared to now. I mean, how could these people be worth over $100 billion? And, meanwhile, people are like begging on the streets and in misery, in large, but maybe you don't have an answer for that. Maybe it's kind of obvious. And then the last question is AI, like AI concerns. How are you feeling about this whole AI moment?
To be honest, I find it really boring.
Okay, interesting.
I fundamentally don't find much interesting about AI. I have dear friends who are deep in the heart of this, doing amazing work. But I'm someone more concerned, I think, with the heart and the feelings than I am that level of automation. I don't feel like that's my place to have any strong point of view, other than I hope it turns out okay. I mean, if I had my choice, I would not be on this journey, but I don't have this choice.
What do you mean not be on this journey with the whole AI thing right now?
Yeah, well, just, I'm sure, I mean, yeah, do I want human intelligence to be
Surpassed?
Yeah, I mean, well, yeah, I don't know that I have a clear answer on that. I don't know that my opinion matters that much. I can see a lot of different answers to that. But yeah, I used to concern myself a lot more with these bigger questions, but looking at Keith Haring's diaries, the painter Keith Haring's diaries are published, and like on almost every page or every entry, there's some note as he like writes about his day or the art he made that day, and then he's like, but none of this might matter because there's probably going to be a nuclear war tomorrow.
Yeah.
So I just shouldn't even try. And like, there's just this constant thing in his, in his diaries about this. And of course, that didn't happen. And, what did Keith Haring's work gain, or like, what positively happens from us thinking like that all the time? And obviously we need some people to do that.
Right. Well, is that
But like what? Yeah.
It sounds a little bit like, I mean, I haven't read the diaries, I skimmed them, but like his version of like Marcus Aurelius's meditations, because Marcus was
Yeah.
for Rome, but whatever, every now and then he was like, hey, like, doesn't really matter, it's all going to disappear in the sands of time anyway.
Ram Dass is always helpful to ground yourself in these conversations too. But yeah, I mean, I see a certain scope of the universe through which I have responsibility and some authorship, and I'm trying to do the best I can with that. And ultimately, the world we need is one where we're all doing that, and there's nothing being imposed on any of us. And yeah, so I don't know, not as hot takey as some may wish.
Fascinating. I'm curious about so on the one hand, there's AI's potential use as a creative tool, which it seems like you're not that enthusiastic about. But on the other hand, is the impact it's going to have on unemployment, and kind of like because a lot of people, even if AI can never make like a great Philip Glass thing, it's still going to make all the commercial jingles most likely. So all those people who made a living on the commercial jingles are going to be suffering, as are the people who do all sorts of other types of programming and design work and so on. Do you have any thoughts about that in terms of social impact, or how that changes the game? No, you don't.
I mean, I don't want it. I mean, I don't say that I don't want it, and that when you say that, what lies ahead is obviously a world of mediocrity.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what that is. That is because how are these things to be programmed? They're going to be programmed to what's most efficient. What is most efficient? Well, what meets business objectives? It's the same reason why you have, subdivisions where every house is the same and everything in New York City is a bank. Exact same logic. So you're going to see that logic applied to many, many, many more things. And yeah, it's going to be uninspiring. It's going to be deadening. And we will have to learn how to escape it.
Yeah.
And artists will.
But obviously, every time there's a major new tool, people are also kind of negative about it. Then it ends up, going back to the camera or the synthesizer or something.
Well, it's even more that it tends to be overrated what the change will be. But yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. Cool. All right. I just want to get back to the beginning. We're talking about the changes that you're seeing in music and film, or how you see that's going to impact the future. Are there some positives that you see in terms of how things could change? I mean, it seems like you're trying to create that or engineer that a little bit with the Metalabel.
Well, I think that what we're seeing is that the size of audience that's willing to pay a la carte for a piece of creative media seems to be going down. If you include video games, maybe not. How much of that is because things have moved to subscriptions with Netflix and music services? How much of that is true consumer preference? How much of that can actually change? And yeah, I think in particular the film industry, which has huge costs and takes so much work to make anything, all that is going to be made even more difficult by the fact that there isn't that pot of gold at the end to incentivize these things, and where every executive is making millions of dollars a year to oversee this process. So I think that's I don't know where that ends up in a few years, but I think what I care about and what I find important is, I think that there is a need to reintroduce the aura to creative work. Walter Benjamin had the piece about the art in the age of mechanical reproduction, that when it's not original edition, not made by the artist's hand, there's a loss of aura. And that is what mechanical production of art and what digital culture has been about. But I think if artists want to be able to make a living, if we want to have a creative ecosystem worth being a part of, then we have to make creative work valuable. and we have to make it interesting and worth paying for. And I think we have to build some alternative systems that work for the creative community and that aren't just simply a rentier platform. And so I think that is a long-term project, but one that Metalabel is very opinionated on, and which we will make a number of strong statements through our product to try to express where we think it could go. But I'm optimistic about that. I just think that there are form factors and ways of meeting the audience where they are that we haven't yet discovered. But I'm confident it'll get there.
Yeah, I guess there's also live. I mean, even live online or live in person seems to be something that people still really like. Cool. I learned a lot. Thank you so much for the time. I'm excited to dive back into Metalabel and check out some of the things you talked about. And yeah, I'd love to stay in touch. Let's get coffee in the neighborhood sometime.
Appreciate that. Yeah, thanks for reaching out.
Ciao, ciao. Have a great day.
All right. Thanks, Daniel.